Every morning at 6 a.m., a woman named Despina makes the same breakfast she has made for 67 years. She is 94 years old. She cooks a pot of black-eyed peas with wild greens picked from outside her door. She pours a generous amount of olive oil over the top. She eats it slowly at a small wooden table with a view of the Aegean Sea. Then she walks to her garden for 2 hours. No supplements, no protein shakes, no prescription for fatigue. When researchers from the University of Athens studied Ikaria in 2009, they found that the island had the highest concentration of people over 90 anywhere in Europe. Dementia rates after 85 were 75% lower than in the United States. 75%. That is not a rounding error. That is not a lucky gene pool. When they tested blood markers in Ikarian elders, their mitochondrial function, the actual cellular machinery that produces energy, looked decades younger than their chronological age. In the United States, the average person loses roughly 40% of their mitochondrial capacity by their mid-60s. 40%. That is not why you are tired. That is the reason you are tired. Despina did not know the word mitochondria. She just knew what to eat. In the next 20 minutes, you are going to learn the 4 foods that explain why people like Despina are still walking their gardens at 94, while people half her age are managing fatigue with caffeine and hoping for the best. And by the end, I will tell you the one food that appears in every single blue zone on Earth, the one that most Western diets have quietly told you to limit. That piece comes last because it only makes sense once you understand the full system. You have probably heard the explanation before. Blue zone people live long because they live simply. Less stress, clean air, walking everywhere, a slower pace of life. That is not wrong, but it is not the reason. Here is how we know. Researchers specifically looked at Ikarian immigrants who moved to Athens. Same family, same genes, same personality. Within one generation of adopting an urban Athenian diet, their health markers collapsed. The longevity disappeared almost entirely. It was not the island, it was the plate. And not just what was on the plate, but what those foods were doing inside their cells. A 2020 review in the journal Aging Research Reviews confirmed what Blue Zone researchers have been noticing for 2 decades. The foods consistently eaten in longevity populations share one biological function. They activate a process called mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria from old damaged ones. Your mitochondria do not just wear out, they can be rebuilt. That is the mechanism. And most people over 55 are eating in a way that actively prevents it. Here is what this video covers. First, the foundation, the daily practice that activates the renewal process at the cellular level. Second, the amplifier, the counterintuitive food category that most people in this age group avoid for exactly the wrong reasons. And third, the complete system, including the piece researchers almost dismissed, which turned out to explain everything. Around minute 17, I will explain why the most popular mitochondrial supplement sold in pharmacies right now may actually be accelerating the decline it promises to fix. That is the trap. We will get there. Let us start where Despina starts, at the beginning of the day. In the Nuoro province of Sardinia, a 97-year-old man named Giovanni has eaten a bowl of minestrone with beans every day at noon since he was 12. He has never taken cholesterol medication. His doctor sees him once a year, mostly out of curiosity. That is not the story. The story is what the beans are doing at the molecular level. Every blue zone on Earth, Okinawa, Sardinia, Ikaria, Nicoya, Loma Linda, shares exactly one dietary pattern. 1. They all eat legumes every day, at least half a cup. In Nicoya, Costa Rica, it is black beans with corn tortillas. In Okinawa, it is miso and edamame. In Ikaria, it is lentils, chickpeas, and black-eyed peas dressed with olive oil. In Loma Linda, where Adventist vegetarians live 10 years longer than the average American, legumes anchor every main meal. Here is why this matters for mitochondria specifically. Your gut bacteria ferment the fiber in legumes and produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, especially one called butyrate. Butyrate activates an enzyme called AMPK. AMPK is the master switch for mitochondrial biogenesis. When AMPK turns on, it triggers PGC1 alpha, the protein that signals your cells to build new mitochondria. This is in theory. A 2022 meta-analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirmed that regular legume consumption significantly increases AMPK activity and reduces markers of mitochondrial oxidative stress in adults over 55. The effect was strongest in people who ate legumes daily rather than occasionally. Daily. That word matters. Take a moment right now and think about the last 3 days of eating. Did legumes appear even once? If they did not, or if they appeared at most once, that is the gap this first practice closes. You do not need a special legume. You need a daily legume. Here is what this looks like in practice. Start with half a cup of any cooked legume per day. Canned is fine. The fiber survives the canning process. Rinse them to reduce the sodium. Black beans, lentils, chickpeas, cannellini beans, edamame. Any of them work. The second step is when. Ikarian and Sardinian patterns put legumes at the main meal. Lunch for Sardinians, dinner for Ikarians. This matters because AMPK activation is more powerful when insulin levels are moderate, not elevated. Eating legumes as part of a larger meal slows glucose absorption and extends the metabolic signaling window. The third step is the pairing. Legumes eaten with a fat, particularly olive oil, increase the absorption of the fat-soluble polyphenols that also signal PGC1 alpha. This is not an accident in the Blue Zone diet. Despina pours olive oil over her beans every single morning. Giovanni's minestrone is finished with a drizzle. It is a system, not a coincidence. In week 1, you are not looking for dramatic energy changes. You are looking for digestive ease, which means starting slowly if legumes are new to you. A quarter cup, building to a half. The gut bacteria that process legumes need about 2 weeks to establish themselves properly. The most common mistake is eating legumes once or twice a week and wondering why nothing shifts. The mechanism requires daily signaling. Occasional legumes do not activate AMPK consistently enough to matter. This is the foundation. It explains maybe 30% of what makes these populations different. Around minute 14, I will show you the specific food within this system that amplifies the effect. The one most people never consider. Keep that in mind. But first, the second food, and this one will surprise you. Go back to what you know about protein. If you are in your 60s, there is a good chance someone has told you that your biggest nutritional risk is not getting enough, that you should be prioritizing lean meats, that you should be supplementing with whey, that the plant foods you are eating, the nuts, the seeds, the legumes, do not have complete proteins and should be secondary. That advice is not wrong about protein being important, but it misses something critical. The people in Sardinia who live to 100 eat less animal protein than almost any other Western population. Their protein comes primarily from legumes, whole grains, and crucially, walnuts. A 2019 study from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, following 118,000 people over 20 years, found that replacing 1 serving of red meat per day with walnuts reduced all-cause mortality by 19%. But when researchers looked at the cellular mechanism, the effect was partly mitochondrial. Here is why. Walnuts are the richest common food source of compounds called L-glutanins. Your gut bacteria, if they are healthy, convert L-glutanins into urolithin A. And urolithin A does something almost nothing else does. It activates mitophagy. That is the cellular process that clears out old, damaged mitochondria to make room for new ones. Think of it this way. Biogenesis, building new mitochondria, is only half the process. You also need to clear the debris. Urolithin A handles the other half. A 2022 randomized clinical trial published in Cell Reports Medicine found that urolithin A significantly improved muscle strength and mitochondrial health markers in adults over 50. But the Blue Zone populations get this compound the same way they have always gotten it through walnuts. 1 to 2 small handfuls per day, every day. Now the second part of this amplifier, and this is where it gets counterintuitive. You have been told that leafy greens are good for you. That is true. But there is a specific category of greens that Ikarian, Sardinian, and Nicoyan populations eat that most Western diets do not include. And the difference in polyphenol content is not small. Researchers at the University of Athens documented over 150 varieties of wild edible greens consumed in Ikaria: amaranth, purslane, chicory, wild fennel, dandelion leaves. These are bitter, deeply bitter. Nothing like the mild baby spinach in a supermarket bag. That bitterness is the signal. It means high polyphenol density, specifically quercetin and camphorol, which activate NRF2, a protein that coordinates the cell's antioxidant and mitochondrial repair responses. The modern trap is this: we have bred bitterness out of our vegetables because we did not like the taste. The result is produce that looks healthy but has 3 to 5 times fewer of the compounds that matter for cellular energy metabolism. Think about the last time you ate something genuinely unpleasantly bitter. Not coffee, not dark chocolate, an actual bitter vegetable. Dandelion greens, radicchio, raw endive, arugula at its sharpest. If you cannot remember, that is the gap. The bitterness is the medicine. In the United States, the average 65-year-old takes 4 prescription medications. In Ikaria, Greece, that number is closer to 1. The researchers who documented this were not studying food. They were studying pharmaceutical consumption. But when they looked for the explanation, it kept leading back to the same pattern. 3 meals a day, legumes, olive oil, bitter greens, walnuts, a short rest in the afternoon, and something else. Something they almost did not record because it seemed too ordinary to be significant. That is what we are covering next. Here is what the amplifier looks like in practice. Add 1 handful of genuinely bitter greens daily. Arugula is the easiest starting point. Radicchio, endive, and raw dandelion greens if you can find them. These are not exotic. They are in most grocery stores. They are just not popular. Combine with the walnuts. A simple daily habit, a handful of walnuts and a handful of bitter greens as a side to any meal, dressed with olive oil. The fat carries the polyphenols into circulation more effectively. Do not cook them to death. A brief wilt is fine. High heat degrades quercetin. The Ikarian way is either raw with olive oil and lemon or very briefly sautéed. When the legumes and the walnuts and the greens work together, you are simultaneously signaling AMPK for new mitochondria and activating mitophagy to clear damaged ones. That is the full renewal cycle. Most people are getting neither signal. The most common error at this stage is substituting with a polyphenol supplement. We will talk about why that is a problem, because the modern supplement version of this mechanism is where things go wrong. We are at the point now where you have 2 of the 3 pieces. I will explain why the modern version of this exact habit, the supplement version sold in every pharmacy, actually accelerates the problem instead of fixing it. That is the trap most people never see. But first, the third food, the one that researchers almost dismissed entirely. The Sardinian blue zone sits in a mountainous region called the Barbagia. The men there live to 100 at 10 times the rate of the global average. This is unusual. In almost every other longevity population, women outlive men significantly. In Barbagia, the gap nearly disappears. When researchers tried to isolate the reason, they kept finding one variable: the amount of olive oil these men consume daily. Not a tablespoon, not a drizzle, an amount that would alarm most Western nutritionists, up to 6 tablespoons a day, on bread, in soup, over beans, over everything. The data from the Ikaria study, published in the journal Cardiovascular Diagnosis and Therapy, found that people consuming the highest amounts of olive oil had roughly a 50% lower risk of all-cause mortality compared to those consuming the least. That is not a supplement study. That is decades of eating measured in a real population. Earlier, I said there is one food that appears in every single blue zone, the one most Western diets have told you to limit. Here it is: extra virgin olive oil, not canola, not vegetable oil, not the refined olive oil that fills most supermarket shelves. Extra virgin, meaning cold-pressed, minimally processed, with the polyphenols intact. Extra virgin olive oil contains 2 specific compounds, oleocanthal and hydroxytyrosol. Both activate sirtuin-1, a protein called sirtuin-1. Sirtuin-1 deacetylates PGC1-alpha, the same master regulator from the first section, and initiates the full mitochondrial biogenesis cascade. This is why the olive oil is not optional in the Blue Zone diet. It is not flavor. It is the delivery system for the entire mitochondrial renewal process. The polyphenols in the beans activate AMPK. The urolithin from walnuts clears the old mitochondria. The oleocanthal in extra virgin olive oil tells the new mitochondria to replicate. Remove the olive oil and you break the chain. Now the supplement trap I promised. Walk into any pharmacy or supplement store and you will find products marketed for mitochondrial support. CoQ10, PQQ, NAD+ precursors. These products are not fraudulent. CoQ10 plays a real role in the mitochondrial electron transport chain. But here is the thing most of the marketing does not tell you. Isolated mitochondrial supplements taken without the dietary context that activates the underlying pathways can create a problem called reductive stress. Your mitochondria are not just energy producers. They regulate cellular signaling, including the signals that tell old mitochondria to be cleared away. When you flood the system with an isolated antioxidant or cofactor without activating the upstream regulators, AMPK, SART1, PGC1 alpha, you can actually suppress the natural renewal signals. A 2023 review in Redox Biology specifically flagged this. High-dose antioxidant supplementation without dietary polyphenol context may blunt the hormetic stress response that triggers mitochondrial biogenesis. In plain language, the supplement may be telling your cells that everything is fine right when you need those cells to respond to a mild stress signal and build new mitochondria. The Blue Zone populations never took a mitochondrial supplement. They activated the pathway through food in the right sequence every day. That is the difference. Now, the thing researchers almost dismissed, when the team studying Ikarian longevity was compiling their data, one of the variables they nearly dropped from the analysis was the afternoon rest. Not a full nap. The Ikarian version is closer to 30 minutes of stillness, often after the midday meal. Most of the team considered it too passive, too cultural, too difficult to isolate as a variable. They included it anyway. And when they ran the numbers, the afternoon rest was independently associated with a 37% reduction in cardiac mortality in men. 37% independent of diet, exercise, and smoking status. Here is why it matters for mitochondria specifically. The primary signal for mitochondrial repair is a mild stress followed by recovery. The food does the signaling. The rest is where the repair actually happens. AMPK activation peaks during the recovery window, not during the stimulus. The Ikarian elders are not just eating differently. They are structuring their day so that the cellular signals have time to complete the job. The food activates the switch. The rest lets the switch do its work. This is why this piece only makes sense once you understand the first two. Without the food, the rest is just a nap. With the food, it becomes part of a recovery cycle your mitochondria can actually use. You do not need to nap. You need 20 to 30 minutes of genuine stillness. No screens, no active problem solving, preferably after your largest meal. That is the third tier. Here is the complete system. Tier 1, half a cup of any legume daily at your main meal, with a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil every day. Tier 2, 1 handful of walnuts and 1 handful of bitter greens daily. Arugula, radicchio, endive, or dandelion if you can find it with olive oil. Tier 3, 2 to 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil woven into meals. Not as a separate dose, but the way Blue Zone populations use it, and 20 to 30 minutes of stillness after your main meal. Total daily time investment, less than 5 minutes of additional food preparation, 20 to 30 minutes of stillness. That is it. In 3 days, you will probably notice your digestion is different, more active. That is the gut bacteria adjusting to the increased fiber. It settles. In 7 days, most people report slightly more even energy in the afternoon. Less of the sharp 2 p.m. crash. That is early AMPK signaling. It is real, but it is subtle. In 30 days, the shift becomes more consistent. Energy feels more reliable. This is not euphoria. It is the absence of the dips that used to feel normal. In 90 days, you have built the habit infrastructure. The gut bacteria that produce butyrate are established. The mitochondrial renewal cycle is running. This is the point where the effect stops being something you notice and starts being something you simply are. Blue Zone people did not change in 30 days. Despina has been eating this way for 67 years. The goal is not transformation. The goal is direction. Despina does not count calories. She has never tracked her macros. She does not take a mitochondrial supplement. She eats beans with olive oil every morning, adds bitter greens to most meals, keeps walnuts nearby, and rests in the afternoon. She is 94, and her cells are producing energy like someone 20 years younger. Here is the contrast that matters. We count. They do not. We supplement. They do not. We optimize individual nutrients in isolation. They eat food in a pattern, the same pattern every day for decades. And that pattern is what activates the biology. The three foods in this system, legumes, walnuts with bitter greens, and extra virgin olive oil, do not work because they are superfoods. They work because they activate a chain. AMPK turns on. PGC1 alpha signals new mitochondria. Urolithin A clears the old ones. SIRT1 runs the replication. It is a sequence. Food is the trigger. Consistency is the key. One action for today. Tonight at dinner, add half a cup of any legume and a drizzle of real extra virgin olive oil. That is tier 1. It takes 30 seconds. It is where every person in every blue zone started. Not because they were trying to optimize their mitochondria, but because that is what was on the table. Before you go, drop a comment. Which of these three foods is already part of your routine? And which one is the gap? I read everything. The people who lived the longest did not discover a secret. They just never stopped doing the ordinary things that keep cells alive. If this story changes how you view the simple ingredients in your kitchen, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the biological history that modern habits have tried to bury. Start planting the seeds of your future today. The next treasury of longevity secrets will be open soon.